From the 32nd floor of the Chicago Financial Group, the city's skyscrapers were visible through the window. Megan Williams had just finished her meeting with her last client and sank deeply into her chair, looking exhausted. Her desk was piled high with documents that needed to be processed. Megan had become known as one of Chicago's top financial consultants. Working late again? Jessica, her colleague, peeked in. Yes, I need to finish the quarterly report today, Megan replied with a smile. There was fatigue in her eyes, but also a determined strength that would never give up. You're such a hard worker. How about joining us for brunch this Sunday? I'm sorry. I'm visiting my parents on Sunday. There was a subtle change in Megan's tone. Her relationship with her parents, Judith and Howard, was complicated. On the surface, they appeared to be a harmonious family, but the reality was different. Megan's heart was always a mixture of wanting to be accepted and the fear of rejection. Oh, another family gathering? Will your sister be there too? Yes, Brittany and her husband will be there too. As Megan answered, she pulled a document from her desk drawer. It was a bank transfer record. $5,000 for last month. She had made 120 payments so far, totaling over $600,000. The original student loan of $500,000 had grown with interest. Megan sighed. 10 years ago, when she entered Harvard Business School, her parents had agreed to lend her the tuition, but with the condition, if you can pay it back properly in the future. Meanwhile, they had paid the full tuition for her sister Brittany at Yale University. That difference was still deeply etched in Megan's heart. Actually, my sister is pregnant. Congratulations. You're going to be an aunt. Jessica sounded excited, but Megan's expression was complicated. Thank you. My mother is so excited she calls almost every day. How's Brittany? Is her morning sickness okay? That sounds like your mother, Jessica said meaningfully. She was one of the few people who knew well about Megan's family situation. Megan looked again at the transfer record. She had worked diligently, repaid her debt faithfully, and lived an honest life. Yet, in Howard Williams' eyes, she was never enough. You always fall short of something. Her father's words, repeated countless times since her childhood, still echoed in her ears. Brittany was different. She was good at playing the role of the perfect daughter that her parents, especially her father, wanted. She majored in psychology in college and after graduation began working in the charitable division of her father's company. 2 years ago, she had a lavish wedding with Ryan Morris, a wealthy real estate developer. Her parents were overjoyed with the marriage and repeatedly said, Brittany made the perfect choice. Megan had served as the bridesmaid at the wedding. As she watched Brittany in her pure white dress, walking down the church aisle on Howard's arm, Megan quietly shed tears. They were tears celebrating her sister's happiness, but also tears mourning a father's love that would forever be beyond her reach. Is it true the wedding cost nearly $3 million? Jessica asked later. Megan just shrugged. She didn't yet know that part of those wedding expenses had come from her repayment money. 2 years later, after Brittany's pregnancy announcement, her parents' attitude became even more biased. Last Sunday, at a family dinner, when Megan started talking about the success of a major project she had recently handled, her mother barely listened. By the way, Brittany, how's your morning sickness? When I was pregnant, it was terrible. And the conversation turned back to Brittany, leaving Megan's story hanging in the air. Another long day was coming to an end. Megan signed the last document and slung her bag over her shoulder. It had started raining heavily outside. Be careful on your way home, Jessica said. Megan waved with a smile. Of course. See you on Monday. Those were the last words she spoke that night. Later, on the slippery roads, the taxi she was in had an accident, and Megan was taken to the hospital with multiple fractures and internal injuries. Her life wasn't in danger, but she needed several weeks in the hospital and long-term rehabilitation. Her body was wrapped in pain everywhere. She had fractures in her right arm and leg, cracked ribs, and internal injuries. According to the doctor, she was lucky. If the situation had been a little worse, she might have lost her life. Lucky, huh? She murmured through dry lips. There was only one bouquet of flowers in the room. It had been sent by Jessica and her colleagues. The hospital room door opened, and Christine peeked in. "How are you feeling?" Christine was Megan's friend since college days, who had rushed over as soon as she heard about the accident. She visited the hospital room every day and was the only one who gave Megan encouragement. "Not the worst. Thank you for coming." Of course, Christine sat in the chair and placed a fruit basket she had brought on the small table. "Your parents?" At Megan's question, Christine shook her head. "Still can't reach them?" "No. I left messages on their cell phones and home phone, but no response." Megan smiled sadly. "They might be busy." Christine's expression clouded. She knew well about Megan's family situation. During college, she had often seen the loneliness in Megan's eyes when she talked about her family. "Why don't you try calling again?" At Christine's suggestion, Megan slowly nodded. She picked up her smartphone by the bedside and tapped her mother's number. The phone rang several times, but there was no answer. Finally, it switched to voicemail. "Mom, it's me, Megan. I've been in an accident and I'm in the hospital. Chicago General. Please call me back, please." She hung up and sighed. She also tried her father's number, but there was no answer there either. "I can't believe your parents are so indifferent," Christine said, unable to contain her anger. "I'm used to it." Megan answered quietly. It wasn't a lie, but in truth, her parents' indifference this time exceeded even her expectations. The accident had happened 3 days ago. It had been reported in the local news. Her name had been mentioned. Yet, there had been no contact from her parents. What about Brittany? She might know something. She's not answering her phone either. She might be busy, she's pregnant. Christine didn't say anything, but the flame of anger still burned in her eyes. She gently held Megan's hand. "I'll come again tomorrow after work. Do you need anything?" "Thank you, nothing special." After Christine left, the hospital room was again enveloped in silence. Outside it was dusk, and through the window, she could see the sky gradually darkening. Megan endured the loneliness and pain, staring at her smartphone, wondering whether to call her parents again. The next afternoon, Megan called her parents again. This time, on the third ring, her mother answered. Her mother's voice sounded a bit irritated. "Megan? What is it?" Her reaction surprised Megan a little. Did she not know about the accident? "I was in an accident. I'm in Chicago General Hospital." "Oh, I see." Her mother's response was colder than expected. "Mom, could you come and visit me? I'm scared being alone." There was an unusual vulnerability in Megan's voice. Normally she would put on a brave face, but now she was truly feeling fear and loneliness. However, her mother's reply froze her heart. Judith made a sound like a snort. "I don't have time for that now. Brittany just had her first baby. Nobody cares about your accident right now." Megan was speechless. She hadn't even been told that her sister had given birth. More than that, her mother's cold words deeply hurt her. "But I'm seriously injured. I need help," she pleaded desperately. But her mother's attitude didn't change. "You're being dramatic. You always want attention. Don't ruin this important time for Brittany. You have nurses there, don't you? We're going to Hawaii. It's Brittany's baby shower. It's been planned for a while. You should have received an invitation too." Megan had no recollection of any invitation. Perhaps it had arrived the day before the accident, but she hadn't seen it. "Mom, please." But the call was cut off. Megan stared at the ceiling in a daze for a while. She couldn't believe that her own parents would treat her so coldly. She tried to hold back her tears, but it was a futile effort. Quiet tears flowed down her cheeks, soaking her pillow. The hospital room door opened, and a nurse came in. Seeing Megan's tears, she approached with concern. "Are you okay? Is the pain worse?" Megan shook her head. "I'm fine, just feeling a bit lonely." The nurse smiled kindly. "Will you have visitors?" "My friend will come, my family seems busy." That was her excuse. She didn't have the courage to explain to others that her parents were prioritizing her sister's baby shower over her accident. After the nurse left, Megan picked up her smartphone. Still dazed, she opened the Facebook app. What she saw displayed were numerous photos of her parents and Brittany's family in Hawaii. Blue ocean, white sand, luxury resort. Brittany was holding her small belly, smiling with her husband Ryan. Her parents also appeared with bright expressions, with photos of them toasting with champagne glasses. Such a lavish party. Megan murmured as she scrolled through the photos. Gourmet food prepared by a top chef, a mountain of expensive gifts. She thought about her medical expenses. Insurance would cover a portion, but there would still be a significant out-of-pocket cost. And she would need rehabilitation costs in the future as well. Yet, her parents were wasting money like this in Hawaii. As she continued looking at the photos, a comment caught her eye. It was written under a photo posted by her mother. "The best gift for Brittany." Including a special contribution from Megan. Megan caught her breath. The meaning of those words was clear. Her parents were using her monthly repayments to cover part of this party. Her debt repayment was being used for her sister's baby shower. Unbelievable. Anger and a sense of betrayal exploded within her. She had diligently repaid the loan every month for 10 years. Sometimes even cutting back on her own life to do so. Yet her parents were using that money, without her consent, for her sister. Megan called her lawyer friend Alex. He was Megan's college boyfriend and was still a trusted friend. "I'm sorry. Do you have time now?" "What's wrong?" "It's been a while." She told him everything about the accident and her parents' behavior. Alex raised his voice in surprise and anger. "I'll come right over. I'll be at the hospital in 30 minutes. As promised, Alex came to the hospital promptly. He sat at Megan's bedside with a serious expression. "First, can you show me the loan contract with your parents?" Megan showed him a scan of the contract from her smartphone's cloud storage. Alex read it carefully and pondered. According to this, the repayment is voluntary, and no strict deadline is set. Legally, temporarily stopping the repayment shouldn't be a problem. He continued, "And there's one more thing to consider. The family property that you're expected to inherit from your grandparents." Megan's grandparents owned a vast tract of land and a house in the Chicago suburbs. Currently, the elderly grandparents lived there, but in the future, it was to be distributed to Megan and Brittany through their parents. There was a special clause in your grandparents' will. A condition that the grandchildren's happiness must be protected. Your parents' recent actions clearly violate that condition. Legally, there's a good possibility that you could claim those rights for yourself alone. At Alex's words, a look of determination appeared in Megan's eyes. "Enough is enough. Tomorrow, I'll send notification to stop all repayments. And I'll also claim the grandparents' estate as my right alone." Her voice was trembling, but it was from anger, not hesitation. She had tried for years to earn her parents' love. But now, it was time to accept that those efforts had been in vain. Alex held her hand. "I'll support you with everything I've got. You are not alone." Megan smiled. Despite the fort in her arm and pain throughout her body, she felt a sense of liberation that she hadn't felt in a long time. Now was the time to reclaim her own life. She sat on the bed, going through the documents that Alex had prepared. They included formal notification of the cessation of loan repayments to her parents and documents to initiate legal proceedings regarding the management of her grandparents' estate. "Is this okay?" Megan asked, looking at Alex. He nodded with a serious expression. "Yes, there's no legal problem with any of this. Once the notice is delivered, they won't be able to complain, at least legally." Alex gently held Megan's hand. "No regrets?" Megan took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. There was no hesitation in her eyes. Instead, years of anger and newfound determination burned there. "None whatsoever. For 10 years, I desperately tried to be recognized as their daughter. But it's over now. I'll decide my own life." Alex smiled. "Good, then I'll send these." He put the documents in his briefcase and stood up. "I'll send them by mail and also copies by email to ensure they're delivered." "Thank you, Alex." Megan expressed her gratitude to him. She knew painfully well how strong the presence of a friend could be right now. "Call me immediately if anything happens." "I'll come right away." After Alex left the hospital room, Megan was alone again. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. She reflected on her life so far, her relationship with her parents, her relationship with her sister, and her path going forward. Anger still smoldered in her chest, but at the same time, she felt a strange sense of liberation. The nurse came into the room regularly to check on her condition. Megan's physical pain was gradually easing, but it would still take time to fully recover. "Ms. Williams, will your family be coming?" At the nurse's casual question, Megan gave a faint smile. "No, no one is coming today." That was the truth. She no longer expected visits from her parents or sister. In the evening of that day, there was contact from Alex. He reported that the notice had been sent safely, and the email had been confirmed as delivered. Megan nodded quietly at the news. She had taken the first step. The next morning, after Megan had finished breakfast, the phone in her hospital room began to ring. The display showed, "Mom." Megan stared at the phone but didn't answer. When the call ended, it immediately began to ring again. This time it was from Dad. She ignored this one too. Within an hour, her smartphone had recorded more than 20 missed calls. Voicemails from her parents also accumulated, but Megan didn't try to listen to them. She could imagine what her parents wanted to say. Just after noon, the hospital room door suddenly opened. There stood Judith and Howard in a state of panic. Megan's mother's face was contorted with anger, and her father's forehead was beaded with sweat. "Megan Elizabeth Williams." Judith burst into the room. Her voice was trembling with anger. "What have you done?" Megan remained calm, sitting on the bed. She had anticipated her parents would come. Still, she was a bit surprised at their intense anger. "What do you mean?" She deliberately feigned indifference. "Your repayment money was supposed to go towards the down payment for Brittany's new house." At her mother's words, Megan frowned. Did they not even understand the reason for her anger? "And that's my problem? We've supported you for years, and this is how you repay us. Ungrateful." This time her father stepped forward and shouted. His face was red with anger. Megan took a deep breath and maintained her calm. For years, she had trembled at her father's anger. But now it was different. She was standing up to protect her rights. "Supported me?" Megan's voice was quiet, but the anger it contained was evident. "While I was lying in the hospital after an accident, you were partying in Hawaii?" Her parents seemed momentarily at a loss for words. But soon, they began listing excuses. "That was planned in advance," her mother said. "And I didn't think your accident was that serious." It's Brittany's first child, her father continued. It was a special occasion. Someday you'll understand. Megan picked up her smartphone and opened the Facebook photos. I also know that you were using my repayment money for Brittany's baby shower. She showed her parents the photo with her mother's comment. What does this mean? Her parents' faces changed. They seemed at a loss for words. Megan continued. You were using my money without my permission. Just for Brittany. A heavy silence flowed through the room. Her father sat down in a chair and held his head. Actually, we were in a bit of financial trouble, he confessed in a small voice. A bit? Megan laughed coldly. How much? Quite a lot. Her mother reluctantly admitted. Without your repayment money, we might have gone bankrupt. Megan was surprised. Her parents had always seemed to live a wealthy life, but was that just an appearance? Specifically? The cost of Brittany's wedding. Her father began, choosing his words carefully. Then helping her and her husband buy a new house, and recently the baby shower, everything was covered by your repayment money and new loans we took out. New loans? Using your grandparents' property as collateral. Megan was stunned. They had even put her grandparents' property at risk. Do the grandparents know? No. Her father raised his face to look at Megan. That's why I want you to stop the estate issue. I want to save it for Brittany's child's future. With those words, the last hope in Megan vanished. They really didn't think about her at all. Brittany and her child's future were more important than hers. For 10 years, I have diligently repaid the loan, Megan said quietly but firmly. You used the money I repaid, cutting back on my own life, for Brittany. And when I was suffering from an accident, instead of visiting me, you were enjoying a party in Hawaii. She exhaled deeply. It's over. The legal proceedings will continue. Please leave. Megan, please. Her mother pleaded. We're family. Family? Megan gave a bitter smile. Family helps each other in times of suffering. You were different. At that moment, the hospital room door opened, and a nurse came in. She looked at Megan's monitor and frowned. Your blood pressure is rising. Did something happen? No, nothing, Megan answered calmly. My parents were just leaving. The nurse looked at Judith and Howard. I'm sorry, but could you leave until the patient's condition stabilizes? Her parents tried to object, but they grudgingly complied with the nurse's firm attitude. They looked at Megan one last time, but she didn't meet their gaze. When the door closed, Megan finally released her tension and let out a deep sigh. This was the beginning of her new life. A true fresh start, liberated from the shackles of the past. A week passed. Megan's physical wounds were healing gradually, but the wounds in her heart were still raw. There were still phone calls and emails from her parents, but she ignored them all. According to reports from Alex, the legal proceedings were progressing smoothly. One afternoon, as Megan was watching TV, there was a knock on the hospital room door. Come in. When she answered, the door opened, and her sister Brittany appeared. Her eyes were red and swollen as if she had been crying. Holding her small belly, she timidly entered the room. Megan looked at her sister with mixed emotions. Anger, love, and sadness were all mixed together. I heard from our parents, Brittany said tearfully. I didn't know your repayment money was being used for us. Megan silently listened to her sister's words. Brittany continued. Ryan is angry too. He now knows what kind of people my family really are, and he's talking about taking the child and going back to his parents' house. Megan was surprised. She hadn't expected Ryan to be that angry. Why is he? He's a very honest person, Brittany said in a small voice. And he's someone who succeeded on his own. He's not the kind of person who lives at the expense of others. She sat down in a chair and wiped away her tears. I've been living a lie all this time. At Brittany's sudden confession, Megan was at a loss for words. Her sister continued. To meet our parents' expectations of the perfect daughter, I've been living a pretentious life. My behavior at parties and in society, it was all an act. She gave a bitter smile. Actually, Ryan and I are drowning in debt. His real estate business is on the verge of failure too. Without financial support from our parents, we would have gone bankrupt long ago. Megan couldn't hide her surprise. Brittany and Ryan had always appeared successful and wealthy. Her parents had said so. It was all a lie. But why? Why such lies? Pride, Brittany answered shamefully. I wanted to meet our parents' expectations. And she hesitated a bit before continuing. I've always been jealous of you. Successful on your own, strong. Brittany began to cry again. But I'm just a fake. Everything was a lie. Megan felt confused by her sister's confession. She had always thought of Brittany as the perfect daughter loved by their parents. But in reality, Brittany had been carrying her own suffering. Why didn't you say anything until now? I was ashamed. Brittany answered in a small voice. And I thought if I admitted failure, our parents would be disappointed. The room door opened again, and Ryan came in. His expression was hard and filled with anger, but that anger wasn't directed at Megan. Megan, I'm sorry I couldn't come to visit you. He approached the bed and took Megan's hand. I didn't know what my in-laws were doing. To think our life was supported by your money, it's shameful. Megan was somewhat moved by Ryan's sincere apology. You didn't know? No, not until yesterday, Ryan said with a bitter expression. Last night, while cleaning my father-in-law's study, I found it by chance. He took out documents from his briefcase. These are documents about a trust fund that your parents set up for Brittany and me. The source of the funds was your student loan and part of your grandparents' estate. Megan was stunned as she received the documents. Indeed, they stated that her parents had established a trust fund for the Brittany couple using her repayment money and her grandparents' property. Moreover, the amount was astonishing. I'm taking my wife and child and leaving. Ryan said quietly but in a determined tone. I cannot be complicit in such wrongdoing. I'll support my family with my own strength. Even if it's modest, it's better to live honestly. Brittany broke down in tears again. Megan, please forgive me. I didn't know. She really seemed devastated by grief. Despite her complex feelings, Megan couldn't feel hatred toward her sister. After all, Brittany was also a victim of their parents' distorted love. I'm not blaming you. Megan answered quietly. But it will take time to rebuild trust. Brittany nodded slightly. I understand. I also want to start over. I want to live honestly with Ryan. I support your legal proceedings. Ryan said, looking at Megan. For the sake of protecting your grandparents' property, and for justice. We will start over on our own. He took Brittany's hand and stood up. We should go now. Megan needs rest. Brittany nodded and looked at Megan one last time. Can I come again? Megan thought for a moment, then nodded. Yes, of course. As she watched her sister and brother-in-law leave the room, Megan felt the burden on her heart lighten for the first time. Her life had changed dramatically over these weeks. The unfortunate accident had, conversely, liberated her from years of bondage. 6 months had passed. Her broken right arm and leg had completely healed, and the internal injuries had recovered. After days of intense rehabilitation, Megan had fully returned to work 2 weeks ago. Her colleagues welcomed her return, and Jessica in particular hugged her with tears. You've done so well. Jessica's words warmly resonated in her heart. Megan's life had changed significantly. With Alex's legal support, she had completely stopped repaying the loan to her parents. Furthermore, the legal proceedings regarding the management of her grandparents' estate had been successfully completed. Her grandparents had agreed to revoke her parents' management rights based on the clause to protect the grandchildren's happiness. In fact, her grandparents were furious when they learned about her parents' actions and fully supported Meghan. "Your father used my property as collateral for a loan," Grandfather William said, his face red with anger. Even at 85, he was a man of strong character. "Don't worry, Meghan. Let's settle everything in the right way." The support from her grandparents became a great emotional support for Meghan. She inherited part of her grandparents' estate in advance and used those funds to purchase a new apartment downtown. It was a place she had always yearned for. A spacious living room, a wall full of bookshelves, and large windows with a view of the lake. She had finally acquired her own sanctuary. After finishing her morning coffee, Meghan began preparing for work. Standing in front of the mirror, she examined herself. She was a bit thinner than before, but there was a strong light of determination in her eyes. She had begun to walk life's path by her own choices. Meanwhile, her parents' situation had changed completely. Meghan's legal measures and her grandparents' anger had become gossip in the community, and Judith and Howard were abandoned by many friends. Their false life and treatment of their daughter had come to light. Especially her father, Howard, had suffered a heart attack from this stress and had been hospitalized 3 weeks ago. Ironically, they didn't have adequate medical insurance and couldn't afford the treatment costs. The life built on appearances and debt had collapsed all at once. "They brought it on themselves," Christine said, but Meghan had complex feelings in her heart. They were her parents. She couldn't forgive their actions, but she couldn't be completely indifferent to their plight either. In the end, she decided to anonymously pay for part of her father's medical expenses. It wasn't forgiveness, merely a humanitarian act. "Meghan, do you really want to do that?" Alex seemed surprised by her decision. "They hurt you terribly." "I know," Meghan answered quietly. "But I don't want to become like them." Brittany and Ryan had also begun walking a new life path. They had sold their luxurious condominium and moved to a small apartment in the suburbs. Ryan had closed his real estate company and found a job at a construction company. The salary was less than half of what he used to earn, but he spoke of the satisfaction of working honestly. After giving birth, Brittany had started taking online courses. She was aiming to qualify as a teacher. "I've always wanted to work with children," she confessed to Meghan. But our parents objected, saying the salary was too low. Meghan quietly supported her sister's new decision. Their relationship was gradually being repaired. It would take time to fully regain trust, but at least now they could talk honestly. Brittany's son, little Daniel, was 3 months old. When Meghan met her nephew for the first time, she couldn't help but tear up. His innocent smile seemed like a symbol of the family's new hope. "Would you like to hold him?" When Brittany asked, Meghan timidly cradled the baby in her arms. Daniel stared at her and suddenly smiled. At that moment, Meghan felt like the ice in her heart melted a little. "He's a really lovely baby," Meghan said gently. As the holidays approached, Meghan was thinking. For years, family holidays had been times of tension and dissatisfaction. Christmas in particular was a day when her parents would excessively spoil Brittany and treat Meghan like a bystander. But this year was different. She could spend it by her own choice. After several days of contemplation, Meghan decided to invite Brittany's family for Christmas dinner. She decided to have a new form of family gathering at her new apartment. On Christmas evening, Brittany, Ryan, and little Daniel knocked on the door of her apartment, which was wrapped in warm light. Meghan welcomed them and entertained them with a homemade dinner. On the table were roast turkey, mashed potatoes, and apple pie, and a small Christmas tree was decorated by the fireplace. "Lovely apartment," Brittany said, looking around the room. "It's so you, Meghan." The conversation flowed naturally, and the tension of the past gradually melted away. Ryan talked about his new job, and Brittany reported on her study progress. They both seemed more relaxed than before. Although financially they had become more constrained, they seemed to have become mentally richer. At dessert time, Brittany quietly looked around the table. "What about our parents? Are you seeing them?" Megan took her wine glass and answered thoughtfully. "No. I receive letters from them, but I don't write back." After a brief silence, she continued. "Our parents are facing the consequences of their choices. But we can choose a different path." Ryan nodded and picked up little Daniel. "For the sake of the children, we must make the right choices." Megan smiled at her nephew's smile. She too had made the right choice. For herself. She had heard that her parents had moved to a small town to escape from debt collectors and were living modestly on just her father's pension. They had lost their glamorous position in society and been abandoned by their friends. Their ostentatious life in Chicago was over, and they were forced to face reality. They were receiving the consequences of their actions. In Megan's desk drawer, several letters from her parents were stored. The first ones were full of anger and blame, but recent ones had words of apology. Especially those from her mother were imbued with regret. "I'm sorry for hurting you. I hope someday will come when you can forgive me." Megan read the letter and thought deeply. However, she wasn't yet ready to write back. The wounds were deep and needed more time to heal. After the Christmas dinner, as she saw Brittany's family off, Megan silently vowed in her heart not to be bound by the past, but to walk the path she had chosen. And perhaps with time, she might learn to forgive. But that time was not yet. Now was the time to focus on healing herself and building a new life. Returning to her apartment and looking at the night view from the window, Megan felt satisfaction and peace. The accident had greatly changed her life, but as a result, she had become a stronger, more independent woman. And above all, she had learned to live her own life.